This is Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Mark. And this guest is not what I expected. Welcome jazz saxophonist Chris Greene to the podcast. I was worried that he'd be a jazz snob, but he was the exact opposite. He was happy to teach me what he could in an hour podcast, and that included learning how he got into jazz. It all started to make sense to Chris in high school. He went on to study jazz in Indiana, which is where he started playing in bands outside of school for the very first time. He formed Chris Greene New Perspective. He had some definite ideas and plans for that group, and he talks about what worked and what didn't. He also talks about how the band ended and the Chris Greene Quartet began. And he's avoided playing tenor sax for quite a long time and for a very specific reason. But he eventually succumbed to its draw. And Chris and I talk about why jazz seems to be open to doing unusual cover songs and some of the unusual ones that he's done. He was also influenced by some very unusual covers by some jazz heavyweights. Chris talks about how the quartet goes about songwriting and the story behind the title of their second album. Now they have a new album out called Conversants, and he discusses that name and the music on the album, including a special song with a connection to his son. We also talk about the writing process, which includes road testing their songs. Check out Conversants on Pravda Records. It's their very first jazz release ever. Pick it up through them or wherever you get music. Follow Chris on the socials at Chris Greene Jazz. Follow us at Performance ANX on socials, and grab our merch at performanceanx.threadless.com or send coffee money through ko-fi.com/performanceanxiety. I've managed to steer clear of all jazz puns so far, so let's keep that going with Chris Greene and Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network.
Come on, it's like, ugh. But it must be done. Let's see. Okay. Hey folks, Chris Greene here, band leader, saxophone player. You are currently listening to the Performance Anxiety Podcast, host Mark Shea. Do one more. Hey everybody, this is Chris Greene here, saxophone player, band leader. We've got a brand new album out on Pravda Records called Conversants with my band, the Chris Greene Quartet. We are happy to let you know that you are listening to the Performance Anxiety Podcast with your host, Mark Shea.
All right, how you doing?
Good. Nice to meet you.
Oh, you too, man. Thank you for doing this. I've like I said in the text message, I don't know a lot about jazz, but I like it and I want to learn. So I like having jazz people on.
Oh, okay. Well, like I told you, at the end of the day, it's music, and I don't know. But if I can help in any way break down the whole myths, jazz is intellectual and mysterious. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah. So. Awesome. Well, we'll see what we can do because I'm not gonna claim to be any type of intellectual here, so we'll see what happens. One of the interesting things I found is that basically you and I are basically the same age. We're exactly 2 months apart. I'm 2 months older than you.
Okay, Generation X in the house. All right.
Exactly. So I like having people my age on because we can you understand the jokes, you understand the references. So.
Right. And there's a shared. Somewhat of a shared history, if you will.
Yeah, a generational experience, kind of.
Shared history, so.
Yeah, so you are a jazz saxophonist, and is that the correct term, a saxophonist?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, good.
Or I guess you could say I'm a saxophonist, but I specialize in jazz, but I do other stuff too.
Okay. It's just not, you're not a saxophoner or something.
Right. I've heard. I guess the saxophonist or whatever. Let's not make this too off-putting.
Right. So the first question I have is, what are you drinking? Because that looked really good.
What am I drinking? I'm actually drinking one of Evanston's finest. This is a brewery right here in town called Sketchbook. Shout out to my friends at Sketchbook. This is their Amistosa line, which is kind of like their Mexican lager. So.
Oh, nice. Well, I will crack out what I've got left of my Woodford Reserve Rye.
I like yours better.
That's all I've got here on my desk right now. So, I only have a shot glass. So I'll have to sip it through a shot glass. So, anyway, this isn't booze and jet, although maybe that would be a good podcast.
There you go.
Booze and jet. Well, okay, so we're going to get into that because that's one of the things that kind of drew me into your music was one song in particular, but we'll hit that in a second. So you do play saxophone. What kind of music did you grow up with? I mean, were your parents really into music? Did they play any music at all? Do they play any instruments? And is that what got you into music?
Not even. My parents were music fans first and foremost. My grandfather, my maternal grandfather, I think he played a little bit of stand-up bass and a little bit of tuba in high school. But my mother eventually studied piano a little bit. But I think I had the benefit of having parents that were just really into music. There was always music playing. My mother would have card parties, and she was really, really big into like the stylistics, and her all-time favorite group is the Temptations. So she's always blasting that at her card parties, or like her sorority, or people that were in her sorority that lived in Evanston or around Evanston. They'd have like monthly Monday card parties.
Oh, nice.
And every time, every once in a while, our apartment would come around, so my mother would be blasting all kinds of stuff. And so my dad was really into like disco and funk and Parliament and that kind of stuff. And there wasn't a whole lot of there's a few jazz albums at home. I mean, we had a big vinyl collection, a few jazz albums at home, mainly soul jazz stuff, like Lou Donaldson and a couple other things. Maybe the one probably more traditional album they had was Dave Brubeck's Time Out, which is the album with Take Five.
Yeah.
So I guess that was one of the first jazz albums I remember liking, because pretty much, I was pretty much, like I said, hearing the stuff that my parents liked. And then I was pretty much big into like the funk and soul and of my day, Prince and Michael Jackson, and then eventually hip hop and that kind of thing. So the majority of my life up to like 15, I pretty much had no use for jazz whatsoever. And
okay.
And eventually changed. But up until that point, I always loved to listen to music. Whenever somebody, I came of age, and like you, probably at the age of the cassette. So if there was somebody I really, really liked, like Prince or Public Enemy or MC Hammer or whoever dropped a new album, I was at the Sound Warehouse or Musicland like opening day to get whatever cassette I wanted.
Oh yeah, and it's funny. It's amazing to me how tastes change, because honestly, the only jazz that I grew up listening to was Vince Guaraldi. Yeah.
Which was funny is like that's such an iconic score, and I didn't even realize I was jazz until much later.
Same here, yeah.
Like, oh wow, that's but it was up until that time, Linus and Lucy and all that stuff. Really, really cool and appropriate music score.
It was awesome. It was Christmas music, and then I heard Stu Hamm doing a cover of Linus and Lucy on one of his solo albums, and I was like, things started to click a little bit more. I'm like, wait, okay, that's not just on a Christmas album or the Peanuts special. That's
right, exactly. That's very much piano trio jazz, exactly. So, and there were little bits here and there. I mean, it's funny, like Coltrane is obviously John Coltrane is one of my biggest inspirations, but the one Coltrane album that I always say the story, the one Coltrane album that my dad had was called OM, and it's from his later, more avant-garde period. Now I've come to terms with a lot of that stuff. I really like a lot of that period stuff. I really, really like this Interstellar Space and Stellar Regions. There's a bunch of really great music from his period right before he passed away. That particular album is awful. It is a really horrible, awful album. Every other Coltrane album, I'm completely behind that. That's just a really bad album. And so that, I think I take that back. My sister's then husband. Oh, sorry. Let me back up. My mother's sister's then husband actually was a jazz guitarist, and so I'd seen him play. Like as a kid, I saw him play every once in a while. But he came over sometime in the early 80s. He came over to our house and was like going fishing through our records, and he grabbed. Oh, you got some Coltrane. He grabbed OM and threw it on, and I was just like, wow, this sucks.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
like, hey, this really sucks. And then like my teacher, but flash forward to at high school, my junior year, like sophomore year, my then band director was like, you need to check this person out. I'm like resistant because I'm just like that old jazz stuff. He's like, check out John Coltrane. You got any Coltrane at home? I was like, yeah, I got a Coltrane album. I remembered I listened to it when I was 8 and I thought it was terrible. I listened to it again and I listened to it again. I'm like, yep, that sucks.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, you know what? You need to list here. Start here. And then he points me towards. We'll get there, but he points me in the right direction, and then we're off and running. So
was saxophone the first instrument you learned to play, or was there something that brought you to saxophone?
No, it's no. Most people will start with like piano and then whatever instrument.
Yeah.
Some people even start with clarinet and say, I want to play saxophone. I pretty much I think I can't. There's in Evanston, we've got a pretty decent music program citywide, and so the guy from the music store comes to each one of the grade schools with all the instruments and lets them try them and hold them, and occasionally we'll let one kid or whatever play on them. And I think I was initially going to pick trombone, but like at the very last minute, I was like, I want to do saxophone. I want to try saxophone because the buttons look really cool.
Yeah.
And I really didn't know much about the saxophone at the time. Didn't really know. It's been, but I picked it and I started playing it when I was 10, and there we go.
So was it something that you wanted to do, or were your parents like, we want you in band, we want you to learn something, or was it your choice?
That was my choice. I mean, interestingly enough, my dad was a world-class athlete, so he was probably like I think he's really wanted me to play sports, but it was just I didn't want to do that, so I was like, all right, this will do. I don't have to do. I mean, eventually you will have to go to rehearsals and practice and stuff like that, but this like suit up for practice or get hit or anything like that. So.
Right, and it gets you doing something at least.
Right, I'm doing something. So yeah, so playing the saxophone or picking music or picking that as a hobby was completely my choice. Okay,
so you're taking it in school and learning, and you said you had a teacher who really pointed you in the right direction and helped you appreciate jazz more. Were you playing with friends outside of school at some point?
Not really. I mean, so from when I started at 10 and then I played it all through middle school and got into high school and played it, didn't really play out with a bunch of people. I mean, I guess I always saw it as being, at the time, at least, I didn't really necessarily think I was particularly good at it or gifted at it. But I always, again, I was listening very much pretty intently to the pop music of the day. So it was like, at the time, I never really had any aspirations to be a musician. Okay. It was always a really, really cool hobby, and there were perks to being in band. For instance, like if you got to play a concert for the rest of the student body, you pretty much got pulled out of class all day and just got to hang around the band room and act like idiots. Yeah. So I was just like, okay, this is perks. This is perk number one or whatever. I will say that I didn't really have much of a jazz vocabulary until much later, but I did notice that people were, even though I didn't really listen to jazz the way I would eventually begin to listen to it, I did notice that when I would, and let me backtrack and say, like, I was in concert band. It's a concert band throughout, and then I was always in the jazz bands in middle school and then eventually into high school. And again, it was always fun. I always loved playing it. Didn't really fancy myself a jazz musician, but it was fun music to play. Again, not really of my time, or so I thought.
It got you out of class.
Yeah, got me out of class. It was fun. People were really excited about it. I was excited to do it. It was a lot of fun. So somewhere along the way, so I've had a few teachers that have really instrumental, like pointing me toward, like my middle school teacher didn't, it's funny, like he saw something in me. So like, he was always like really encouraging me to, like, you got to join jazz band. You got to learn this. You got to, was always encouraging me during the solo, to do solos during jazz, take a solo during jazz band, or play or there were solo competitions throughout the school district. So he's always really encouraging for me to do that as well. but then so then I get into high school and again, I run into some teachers that are really super, super encouraging. Stand up, take a solo, you got a nice sound, blah, blah, blah. Just really, really encouraging. So one of the big moments is, during my sophomore year, they were having our spring concert, like all the orchestras and all the bands have their concerts. And we're, the band we're off in the back watching the orchestra play. And for the most part, we're pretty respectful. We're listening, but we're also stupid kids.
Yeah.
Joking and probably making entirely too much noise during their performance.
Right.
So I'm like, the late great Dr. Alvin Mistak, the orchestra director, who was also the music theory teacher, calls me and we're waiting in the band room, says, Greene, come here. So I'm like, oh shoot, here we go. Here we go.
Right.
This is where I'm in trouble now.
I'm gonna catch it.
Come to my office real quick. I was like, okay, come sit down. I'm like, he's ready to tear me a new one. He's like, hey. He's like, you're going to take my materials and music theory class next year, right? I was like, what? He's like, you're going to take my theory class next year, right? It's like, sure. I mean, does it satisfy my art whatever requirement that I need to get through? He's like, yeah. No, I was like, yeah, sure. Sign me up. That's no problem. Sure, no problem. So that's the end of my sophomore year. So junior year, I take this materials and music class, and it completely changes the way I think about music, because now I'm not just reading notes on a page, but I'm actually kind of understanding the quote unquote science underneath it. So, and he's got like these a group of high school kids, high school boys and girls in this class, taking apart classical scores and analyzing this and dropping, playing, doing what they call drop the needle, which is like, all right, I'm going to drop, this is, what piece is this? And then he would drop, you'd have to talk about what piece it is and what's happening and all that, what's happening during the song. And using all these fancy musical terms that now, before I just would kind of like skate my way through the song. Now I actually knew I was learning like what these terms meant. So that's helping me. And then on the other side, my band director at the time is like the one that's like, you need to check out Coltrane. And I'm like, I've already checked out Coltrane's home album. It's dreadful. I don't ever want to hear what this guy has to say again. He's like, no. Check this album out. When you go home, go to the library, grab My Favorite Things by John Coltrane. He's like, all right, I'll grab it. There's probably gonna be some BS, but fine. I'll put it. I'm like, holy crap! This is some of the greatest stuff I've ever heard in my life, because it's like it's a bass line that's pretty steady, which is pretty, a close cousin to the stuff the hip hop or funky stuff I was listening to. It's a pretty steady bass line.
Yeah.
But I don't quite understand what John is doing on top of the music, like musically, but it's a lot closer to something that I can aspire to than the stuff I previously heard. And pretty much was like, oh my, then I'm like, oh my God, this Coltrane guy is amazing. He's something went off with him when he made this album, but he is amazing.
What can't all be singers, right?
What else is this guy doing? Well, he used to play with Miles Davis for a number of years. Really? What album? And then I grabbed Kind of Blue, and then I'm nuts about that for a while. And it's pretty much just from there, it's just like I'm listening to all this stuff. Then, like, while I'm listening to all this stuff, again, no real jazz language in my playing, but something's going on where I'm taking solos. I'm certainly a lot more daring. And so I'm taking solos in front of like the student body during my junior year. And, people are always very respectful. They always clap at the end of your solo, but people were like, yeah, like really like raucous applause. I'm just like, wow. I'm like, you like that? I'm like, well, all right. Well, imagine if I knew what the hell I was doing. Like, really, like, if you like that, wait till I practice what I'm supposed to practice, and then I'll really show y'all something. So,
that is awesome.
Then there you go.
So is that when the light bulb kind of went on, and then you decided to study it in college, right?
That's when the light bulb. That's pretty much when the light bulb went off, and was like, the theory stuff made the music stuff that I was playing make a lot more sense. And then I started really intently listening to this, really hearing this music, this great music that I'd been around for a while. It just never really got on my radar. I was kind of off and running. And so that was the kind of decision for me to go off and study it at school.
So you studied at University of Indiana. What is a program like that like? I mean, what kind of things are you doing when you're studying music for a college degree?
Well, that's a bunch of things I could say about that. Well, first of all, so both my parents are alums of University went to Indiana University, not for music, but for other things. But they were all. It's funny, like they were always basically from birth. They're like, when you go to IU, you do this, and this, and it was like, what about the East Coast? You didn't hear what I said. Yeah. When you go. You're going to do this, and go see this, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, whatever, fine. And so I go to check out, when I'm starting to get serious about music schools, guess what school has the #1 jazz program at the time? So,
wow.
Completely serendipitous. So I'm like, it turns out that this is the #1 school run by this legendary jazz educator by the name of David Baker, who pretty much revolutionized jazz education. So, I was hot stuff for high school, but again, not much in the way of jazz language and just no real clear way to. Certainly now, we live in a much more, great time for kids to want to learn how to play jazz. There's any number of YouTube clips and this and that, and there's all kinds of stuff. Not saying you necessarily had to go to a music school to learn how to play jazz, but for a kid like myself that didn't have didn't necessarily any language or any concept how to get my foot in the door of how to play. It was hugely instrumental just going to that school because there's a kind of a step-by-step program of like how to listen to songs and how to listen for chord progressions and then how to try to transcribe solos, because pretty much everything that we do as improvisers is built on 100 years of recorded music.
Right.
And I'm not going to sidestep learning how to play. Eventually I can figure out my own style or whatever, but to really do it right, I've got to, when things drilled into our head, is like you have to base your stuff off of these old recordings are going to make you better. And eventually, you'll like what you like, you'll gravitate towards whatever you want to gravitate to, and you'll add in your own stuff as you go along. But you've got to start with these. You got to start with these musicians and then work, And so just a lot of that, a lot of jazz history, a lot of some jazz arranging classes, some harmony classes, some classical theory classes, ear training, just all that stuff, and even just like classical saxophone stuff, which I don't really play much of, but it was certainly good as far as like getting my overall technique together. Just really like. Playing the saxophone correctly or not. Playing it more, doing some more technical things and getting and everything, just getting that together.
Okay. So you're building your foundation.
Yeah, very much so. Which I had a decent foundation from the Evanston school stuff, but this really set me on like, these are the things, if you want to play music professionally, these are a long list of things you have to get together to make it happen. It was a great and fortunate time that I had.
So while you're in school learning all this, are you playing with other people outside of class?
Yes. So yeah, and so I skipped over. So I will say, like, just jumping back to my senior year, or actually jumping into my senior year, when after the light bulb went off, after I took my theory class in junior year and started listening to jazz, I started, for whatever reason, I got fairly serious about it. And so all of a sudden there were these bands that would have like throw concerts at like high school bands outside of school that would have concerts at like the church basement or like little art galleries or whatever. Like all of a sudden, like I was their go-to guy to play with them.
Oh, cool.
And even like a couple of professional like blues band or local kind of funk bands or whatever would call me up to rehearse with them or play some gigs with them. Or the guy who basically took over the music program my senior year of high school, he was throwing me all these kinds of theater orchestra pit gigs or whatever. So things like that. So he saw that I was starting to get serious. It was a very fortunate time. So then, so by the time I get to school, I'm getting my technique and everything together and getting my jazz vocabulary together, but I'm still getting together with other musicians outside of, jam sessions and trading ideas and everything. But we're still, but yeah, I'm still trying to play wherever I can.
Are you strictly focused on jazz when you're playing in your own stuff, or are you venturing out into rock, or at that time alternative was really coming into its own?
Honestly, it's never been a thing to me to. Honestly, I like playing music, period. So I've by that point I played with some rock bands in high school and sat in with a few rock bands or blues bands around the college town or whatever. And then we'd have jam sessions or the occasional the few jazz gigs that were in Bloomington at the time. I played a handful of them as well. So it just, I think at that point of the game, and just in general, I still carry that ethos, but especially at that time, it's just anytime you spend on stage playing with musicians is time well spent. So if it's not necessarily jazz, and it's still the way I think. It's as long as it's cool people, good music with cool people, the style personally to me doesn't really matter.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. So your first album comes out in 98, but you actually, if I read correctly, you're actually working on that in 94. So that was right around the time you graduated from college.
Yeah. So, the album came out that album On the Verge came out in 98. I think I actually started recording it the year before, but it came out in 98. But the band that led up to that recording, I formed in 94. It's called New Perspective was the name of the band.
Right.
So I formed that band in 94, and we played quite a bit around town, like cafes, and eventually started playing in Chicago venues and Chicago clubs. What eventually led up to the 98 release of On the Verge was the band that began in 1994.
Okay. It seems like that it's a mix of different styles. I mean, was that trying to kind of meld all your influences together into a single band?
Very, very much so. Very, very much so. Yeah, it was more in looking back, you could probably say the New Perspective stuff was I was thinking of it and very earnestly as jazz. Some people might think of it as fusion. We actually got a fair amount of mileage because the whole acid jazz thing was really, really big around that time, like the Jamiroquais and the Brand New Heavies and what was it, Groove Collectives and all that stuff. And Liquid Soul was a huge powerhouse around here. So we kind of I don't want to say we got lumped in with that, but stylistically, we were all coming from similar influences. And so I wouldn't necessarily put what we were doing in the acid jazz camp, however, but if you're, as a early kid in their 20s trying to get his foot in the door of the Chicago music scene, if you want to have an acid jazz night and you want to hire my band and you want me to call my band acid jazz, I will call my band acid jazz. If you give me a gig, I will call my band acid jazz for the night.
Well, I went back and I started listening to this, and I don't know, for some reason, whenever I see the song Dragonfly, I'm drawn to that for some reason, because I'm never disappointed in a song called Dragonfly. There's always, it's always aptly named. The song usually sounds like a dragonfly, and you do not disappoint with that. That's a great song, and I love the version of Good Riddance you did on the second album.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So again, it was but it definitely was a conscious effort to meld the influences, and not even just the straight ahead jazz stuff, but people that I was really into at the time, or even by that time I was still very, very intently listening to like the hip hop of the early, late 80s and early 90s. So all the Tribe Called Quest stuff and, EPMD and Redman and all that great stuff that was happening. But still very much a Prince fan. And then there's a guy who was born in Chicago who now lives in New York, guy by the name of Steve Coleman, who's I'm a huge fan of his. He's an alto sax player, but he's really into like jazz, but really, really funky, but really, really odd meter stuff. And there's
cool.
These weird beat cycles that intentionally don't line up, but it always adds this weird tension to it. But I've been a fan of his from a very long time. So those albums were my attempt to like kind of make an obvious attempt to meld all those influences together. I'm
writing that down because that sounds fantastic. I want to listen to that.
Oh yeah,
Steve Coleman.
Steve Coleman and Five Elements. It's all of his stuff is great, but his run, I'd say from the 90s, like 1990 to like 99 is just unbeatable. Like there's an album called Rhythm People, and then pretty much every album from there is just amazing.
Oh, cool! I have to check that out. I love stuff that's a little off, like different. I don't want to say off. I guess different from what you expect. Like I'm a huge fan of King Crimson and stuff like that, and that sounds like it might be something I could get into. So I'm definitely want to try it out. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. How did you go from New Perspective to Chris Greene Quartet?
A couple of reasons. So, first and foremost, I've been doing a few gigs with New Perspective. Was kind of winding down. Chicago. It's funny. Chicago's a great city to work. And it's certainly a lot better in this respect now. But there was a period of time, I'd say in like the early 2000s where we could pretty much get a gig almost anywhere. Like some straight ahead rooms, but you guys are playing electric bass. Yeah, but you'll be fine, don't worry about it. Or so we get away with that. Or like, again, the acid jazz rooms or the smooth jazz rooms that we kind of were able to kind of sneak under the radar. And you guys are going to play some Grover Washington, right? Like, yeah, we got you. Sure, we got you. No, I love Grover, no disrespect. But, so, we would get in there. But then there just got to be this weird period, at least in my opinion, where like, we were like too funky for the jazz rooms and too weird for the smooth jazz rooms. So it ended up we were playing mostly like rock rooms, like the Elbow Room and the Bee Kitchen and Morristown, which is fine. Or maybe not rock rooms, but more eclectic rooms that had more of eclectic booking policies. Okay. So that was fine. I was also spending a lot of time. I was actually playing with a cover band that was touring a lot, which was great. Which was great for the career and great for the pocketbook. But I really wanted to play. I found myself. I was primarily an alto saxophone player up to about 2002, and then I started pretty much playing tenor to join this cover band that I started touring with. And I pretty much was like, I avoided playing tenor for a long time because I knew if I started playing it, I was really going to like it. And all my other musician friends were like, you should play tenor because you think like a tenor player. No, I don't want to do that because I'm playing alto and I've got to think. You shut up because I know what I'm doing. And then I started playing tenor. I was like, damn it, they were right. And so I fell in love with it. And so part of it was like I wanted to find a vehicle to play tenor in because I wanted to get back to playing more quote unquote straight ahead jazz. So there was that. I was playing with the cover band, so I at least wanted to have something to balance it out. And so that initial impetus for starting the quartet. And also the last guy, if you notice, Damien Espinosa, who played keyboards on Jazz, the second New Perspective album, he was my first choice to play piano for the quartet as well. So
when you're talking about different types of saxophones, the tenor, is that the one that is most recognizable to somebody who's based in rock?
I would say, yeah. I would say
like
so.
Like the Clarence Clemens, Bruce Springsteen kind of sound?
Clemens and King Curtis and all those guys. Yeah, they were all tenor players.
Okay.
Probably the one guy that probably got away with playing alto in rock was probably David Sanborn and all those David Bowie records.
Right. Okay.
The alto player basically playing all throughout Young Americans is the late great David Sanborn.
So you got the quartet going, and one of the things that fascinates me about jazz is the openness about doing cover songs. And I think you, with the quartet, have just done some insane things. Like, okay, first of all, the second album, I love the title, Electric Boogaloo. That's
so that was one of my best friends, Dempsey. I put out the first album, Soul and Science Volume 1, and he's like you and me, Generation X, smart ass, just like that. And so, him being my best, I put out Soul and Science Volume 1. He's like, so what are you going to call the next one? Soul and Science 2, Electric Boogaloo? I was like, you know what? I just might do that. And then lo and behold, I was like, look, there you go. So I did that title mainly to prove a point. But anyway, go ahead with your question.
No, I say that's one of the first things I loved about it was that Electric Boogaloo. It's a joke that our generation can appreciate more than anybody else.
Exactly. No one else outside of generation will get it. But I was like, did he really name that Electric Boogaloo? I said, yes, I did.
When I saw that, I started laughing. I'm at work and I'm sneaking in research while I'm working. And I just started laughing out loud. I'm like, that is brilliant. I like this guy already. But one of the awesome things about that is the cover of King of Pain, because I didn't I just saw the song titles and I'm like, is that the Police song? Could it be? And at first I'm like, okay, could be. And then all of a sudden those two notes come do, and I'm like, that's it. This is incredible. And it's about 7 minutes long, and it's just amazing. And one of the things that I love about jazz and jazz-based music is the openness to cover anything, whether it's a jazz standard or a pop song, take it into the stratosphere and make it make sense while it's out in space, and then pull it back in. It's amazing, and it seems to be something unique to jazz. And it seems that jazz players are more open to doing something like that than, say, rock players.
Well, it's funny. Like, jazz has always had a relationship with the popular. First of all, it's always had a relationship with the song. I mean, these songs that we call standards. One click of your Wikipedia will tell you what 1920s or 30s musical it came from,
right?
Or this is the title song from this movie. There's a great old ballad called My Foolish Heart, which I just found this out. It was based off this movie that was, I guess, came out in the 50s. The movie was, I guess, panned, but the one thing that came out of it was this song, My Foolish Heart, is now, in the jazz standard ballad lexicon.
Wow.
So we've always had a relationship with popular songs and show tunes.
That's a good point. At some point, a standard had to be a pop song.
Absolutely. It's like I was covering some album or something. I think the band, we were covering some album verbatim, and I was just kind of doing my research just so I could talk about the songs. It's amazing how 4 out of the 7 songs were originally sung by Bing Crosby in the 40s. And it's just like, wow, and these are songs that is regular old standards, and they're all the first recording was Bing Crosby in 1940 something, or Nat King Cole's first hit was this song, whatever. It's easy to forget that. So, it's not, now the trade-off, of course, is that it has to be a good song or something that you can do something with.
Right.
Stevie Wonder songs can lend themselves great to jazz interpretation. Many sing songs like King of Pain lend themselves to jazz interpretations. It doesn't work with everything, but those are 2 composers offhand that, Joni Mitchell, I've heard some cool interpretations of that.
Oh, wow.
Or even like one of my favorite albums of all time is this album called Sonny Rollins. He made this great album called Way Out West, where it's a picture of him in the desert, and he's holding. It's a trio album. It's him on tenor saxophone, acoustic bass, and drums, and they're basically playing songs either from old westerns or inspired by old westerns.
Oh wow!
It like the title song or the first song on the album is "I'm an Old Cowhand," which I forgot. It's from some goofy, corny movie in the 30s.
Yeah, I know the song. Yeah,
and it absolutely should not work. It should absolutely be the worst album in the world, but it's one of the greatest things ever recorded.
Oh wow!
But Sonny, brilliant musician and thinker that he is, wheels these corny songs from movies that he loved as a child into viable jazz vehicles. So that's kind of where I took my cue from for like The King of Pain or other other stuff. It's like
borderline,
borderline, like you want to talk? I got when I brought that to the guys in the band, I got a lot of initial pushback. So, really, and all I could say is, look, guys, neither one of us were around when Charlie Parker, Coltrane were running the streets. Unfortunately, I'm a kid of the MTV generation. So while I was waiting for for Beat It or Little Red Corvette to come on the video, I'd have to sit through, songs that I would eventually like. And one of those songs that I really, really loved as a kid was Borderline. And I was like, I'm going to do something with that. And then I eventually brought it in and, you want to play that? Like, oh, no, but check out what we're going to do with it. We're going to do this and switch back and forth with this and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I'm like, see, I told you. So that's kind of where I take my cues from. It's like it's radical, but then if you put it in the context of jazz history and what we do with standards anyway, it really ain't that radical.
I love how you describe it in some of the live videos that I've seen. It's almost you're kind of preparing the audience for what they're about to hear. And it's almost like telling them they're going to go through the 5 stages of grief while listening to the song. So,
because I've had people like when we play that, so I usually will either set it up or I will just say like it's something from my childhood, and I think it's going to be some sweet, beautiful song, and it ends up being, wait a minute, I know that song, and then by the chorus they're singing along with it, like gotcha, yeah. and they're enjoying it because it's like okay, and it's certainly not like for me anyway, it's not like a compromise. I'm not like playing Madonna songs because I'm trying to get over. I just happen to really, really like this song. It was just something that I felt that I could do something with. And even to them on their end, they're probably they might think, oh, this is cool, or this is cute, or this is a little kitschy. But then we're taking it seriously as a song, and then because we're taking it serious, but not ourselves too serious, they're actually getting into it. And it ends up being a fun thing. That
is awesome. So who is in the quartet besides you?
So it is me on tenor and soprano saxophones, Damien Espinoza on piano and keyboards, Mark Piani on double bass and electric bass, and Steve Corley, I always tease him calling the new guy because he's been with us since 2011.
I love it. I'm telling you, I want to talk about the new album in a second because the drumming on that, I love. The one thing that always hooks me into jazz music is the drumming. And God, that guy is amazing.
I'm a lucky man. I just say that. I'm a very, 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 very lucky man to have him. When he joined the band, no disrespect to our previous drummer, he was a magnificent drummer, but when he joined the band, like it was like, oh my God, there's so much that we can do now. There's so much writing we do. And the thing that I really love about him is that all of these guys, but especially Steve, like he can take the most complicated time signature that we have and make it groove. It doesn't sound like a math problem, or he's actually making it groove, and to the point where like people are bobbing their heads and along with some complicated time signature, but it doesn't really sound like it's off-putting. He plays it in a way that makes it digestible. Right.
Yeah. It says it doesn't sound complex. Like going back to King Crimson. Yes, that kind of stuff. Some of those drum beats are insane, and it's kind of they're challenging, I guess, maybe for an audience.
Yeah, they can be.
When you guys are working out material, whether it's something original or a rework of something, what's the process for you guys? Are you coming in as band director saying, all right, here's what I want you to do, here's what I want you to do, or is it more organic? Is everybody working everything out at the same time? Is there a process?
There tends to be. Well, yeah. When we do, usually when we rehearse, it's usually the new stuff, or maybe to clean up. Like, hey, let's clean this, whatever. But really, more often than not, it's to work on like what song to work on. And even then, it's like we all write. First of all, we all write. So or we all will arrange stuff or bring stuff in. So even me, like I'll bring a song in. This is the melody. These are the chords. For instance, to go back to like Steve, I'll just kind of give him some like cryptic direction. Like I'd like to think Art Blakey meets Questlove meets this or whatever, and just kind of like figure out from there. Or I'll give him like, give me the snare or the hi-hat pattern from this song, but then maybe this song, but maybe with this kind of feel, or think like this drummer or whatever. And as far as like my piano player, Damien, it's like, there's nothing I can tell him about how to play the piano. I can just say like, this is what I'd like to hear. Now, and he can take my chord progressions and make them fuller and better. Yeah, which he often does, and he makes them sound fuller and better. Or even just like, it's kind of like, I'm kind of from that Duke Ellington school. It's like, I write the stuff with them in mind. I've got my ideas of how I want them to sound, but somewhere it's like they might do something accidentally, and I might be, what you just did, like do that again. Like add, it was an extra note from what I wrote, but it might work well to transition into this next section or something like that. Right.
So you're writing with them in mind, but you're letting them be them when you're playing it.
Exactly. Because that's really it keeps it collaborative. It does, it's like, and on one hand, like I've got an idea for a song, but it's also like, I'm working with three of the most creative musicians I know. So, let them figure their place out in the music. And if I like it, I might say, okay, I like what you did, but maybe a little less of that, or maybe a little more of that. So it's my job to like take my idea, give it to them, and then take their ideas and weave it together. And even like, even on my end, like sometimes I'll write something, and I notoriously I'm a lot better with this now, but I used to have a really, really hard time coming up with ending for my song. Like how do you end the song? Like it's, you can only vamp so many times before it starts boring.
Right.
In the song. And so Mark, our bass player, was I used to lean on him a lot for like, how should I end this? And like he'll come up with, how about this? And it's usually the most simple solution. I'm like, there you go. That's how we're going to end the song. So it's just leaving yourself open. Like it's not going to do. If I'm a dictator about things, it's not going to be fun for them to want to make music with me. So why not involve them in the process? They're equally wonderful, talented. We're all talented musicians. We can all figure out like, get to the spirit of the song and what works there, and what chord works there, and what bass line works there, what drum, let's figure that out. And it always comes out sounding really good. Yeah,
you're playing with these guys in particular for a reason. And I wanted to say, you've played with some amazing people. A couple of them have been on the podcast, so I thought it was really cool. So these guys haven't been on the podcast, but played with Common, Temptations, a band I haven't heard of in ages, Poi Dog Pondering, Andrew Bird, who's just amazing, and former podcast guests Steve Dawson and Nora O'Connor.
Yeah, my buddy, my Pravda label buddies. Yep. Just did a gig with Steve the end of last month. Is back.
That's awesome. He's been on the podcast twice. In fact, we just released the second episode a couple of months ago, probably around the same time that you guys played together.
So yeah, as a matter of fact, I did the horn arrangements on this. It Was a Mistake song. I did.
Awesome.
It was a mistake.
That's, again, it's like, I'm a jazz musician, but I like music. So it's just like, it's funny, like, kind of as far as being a jazz snob or whatever. It's like, it's funny, like when I played with New Perspective and I played with that cover band, people would call me for jazz gigs, but people would be like, no, I've got this jazz gig. I know you usually play like a lot of one chord funk and stuff. Are you going to be all right playing standards? And, can you handle that? I'm like, yeah, I went to school to study jazz. And then when I started playing with the quartet initially, it was like, I know you play a lot of jazz, but I've got this funk group. Would you want to play with me? Because I know it's only one chord. I'm like, yes, of course. So now I think people thankfully, like people like Steve and all these people know better, they know that I'm not going to I'm not going to get up there and play a bunch of stupid, Charlie Parker song. Right. I'm going to play a lot. I'm going to play something that makes sense on your song. Thankfully, people like Steve, they know that kind of stuff.
So you have the new album out, Conversants. Has it been 7 years between albums at this point?
Wait a minute. Oh, no. It was 7 years since the last studio record.
Okay.
There were few live records in between, like 2 live records and then one kind of live EP. But yeah, this is our first studio record.
Okay. So that makes a little more sense to me. I've been enjoying it immensely. So the first thing I have to ask, is there a meaning behind the album title?
Just the Conversants means familiar, like familiarity with. And so part of that can be looked at as like our being familiar with each other's. I'd say half of that is like our being familiar with each other as musicians. Because one thing that I think that people both like jazz, hardcore jazz fans and people that don't know nothing about jazz or have, very little experience, even if you know nothing about the art, the style, the genre, whatever, if you come to see us, you're not coming to see 4 guys that are just kind of like their heads buried in the music or whatever. Or 4 guys that are playing stuff independently of each other. We're very much like, we're very much playing with each other and off of each other, and everything that I do is everything that say Damien does on the piano has a direct effect on how I play, and vice versa. He'll feed it back, so we're all interacting very much together. So that meaning, but there's also just being conversant with different styles of music, because like we just talked about earlier, it's like before I got to any of this jazz stuff, I was just listening to pop music. And I still listen to a lot of I try to keep my ear open to like cool stuff that I might like. So it's just being conversant with each other as musicians, but also being conversant with other styles outside of jazz, or just even within jazz, like avant-garde stuff, smooth jazz, straight ahead, old, stuff from the 20s, stuff from the fusion stuff. It's just like there's all kinds of stuff to check out, learn from.
So I've got a few favorites after listening to it for a few times here. And I love the way you start off with Gentleman's Breakfast. That's the one, the drumming on that just sucked me into the entire album. That drumming on that the song itself is great, but it's what I think of when I think of jazz drumming. Those great fills and everything. It's beautiful.
Thank you. We're trying to I'm a pretty big fan of there's some Brazilian music, like Brazilian soul stuff. I guess some of it's called like MP. I forgot what it stands for. It's called MPB, which is my sister's she knows a lot about Brazilian soul. So it's kind of like my tribute to like a lot of those great musicians like the 60s and 70s that were like Brazilian soul stuff, and then like some bossa stuff, and some kind of folkier stuff. So it was kind of like what I had in mind when I wrote that song.
So I grew up just a little outside of New York City, and Broken Glass sounds like in a TV show, or when they're trying to say this New York jazz scene, or that's the kind of sound that I would always hear. And that song just kind of makes me feel like I'm a kid and we're going to go into New York or something, because I would hear that on the radio or walking through New York, you'd hear jazz coming from clubs. And that's kind of the feeling I get from that song. And that's one of the things that makes it touches me with that song.
Damien, our piano player, he wrote that one.
I think my favorite track, though, is The Emperor Strikes Back.
Oh, thank you.
That song is great. And I know there's special magic with that song. So I know there's a special connection with your son on that one.
Yes. So he actually wrote the melody of the main melody, or the melody of the first section is something that he wrote. Like he's a awesome guy. It's my job as his father to mess with him. Yeah. So and he actually plays piano. He plays it infinitely way better than I do. But I'm not sitting at the piano. I'm like, trying to work on some stuff. But every once in a while, I hear him walking by, like, hey, Al. He actually came up with this melody. And so hey, Alex, it's a song that I wrote, and I was playing the melody that he played, and I'm like, I'm going to do something with it. I'm going to take all the money. I'm not going to give you any credit. Ha ha ha. And then one day I sit down at the piano, start playing it, and all of a sudden, the creative juices start going, like, oh, wait a minute. And then you start, next thing you know, you're shifting things around and you got a song. And so I'm like, all right, I actually did take your melody, son. But I will give you credit. So I set up a whole ASCAP publishing company for him. So he is credited. He's officially a credited composer on this album.
Oh, that is so awesome. I love that. I love hearing stories like that. I've got 3 kids of my own, so that touches me. The song that's really competing with that as my favorite is your version of "You Don't Know What Love Is." That song is the way you guys it's so delicate. I absolutely adore that song. It's so beautiful. Songs like that you want to cover that going beforehand, or are you working things out when you get to the studio? I mean, how do you pick what songs when you want to do originals and when you want to rework somebody else's material?
Really, there's never really any rhyme or reason. Usually, when it comes to to answer your second question first, when it usually comes to stuff we're going to record, more often than not, it comes to we're playing. We're always working on new stuff or trying to add new stuff. What are the strongest songs that we have right now, or of the newer songs? Like every once in a while, we'll add a newer song, and at first we're kind of reading off the page or trying to keep the form together, keep the structure together. But it always happens where we all of a sudden we've internalized the structure of the song or the chords or the feel or whatever, and then we're just kind of using that as the springboard to play together and make music and have a musical conversation. So it no longer becomes trying to play it right. It just becomes playing it together and playing honestly. And it always happens. And it's oh man, the song starting to sound really, really good. It's it's almost time. So fortunately, we were ready to record these songs and we recorded them. As far as that song, the song itself, "You Don't Know What Love Is," it's always been one of my favorite ballads. It's long been one of my all-time favorite ballads. But it's always been a thing when if we play it, if we add it to what we do, how do we make it ours? Because we can play it. Steve, our drummer, can get his jazz brushes, and we can just play it like your typical jazz ballad and be done with it.
Right.
And it would sound perfectly fine. But every once in a while, those creative, the circus comes to town, and it's or whatever. I don't know if I add the Curtis Mayfield song on "Give Me Your Love," or I don't know if I had it or I was thinking about it, but I was thinking about that groove and how that's kind of that old kind of slow burn groove that very, very people that I know do often. But I'm and then every once in a while you're how would that song work with that feel? How would that beautiful song work with that feel? And would people be able to get the reference of the Curtis Mayfield song underneath the melody of this old standard? And it's just kind of all right, and you just got to start to put it together, and then it just becomes a matter of explaining. Really, all I had to do, because we all know the song, the original, or we all know "You Don't Know What Love Is," but it was just a matter of one of the wonderful things about the internet is on my phone I can Curtis Mayfield, "Give Me Your Love," send it to the group chat. Hey guys, one of my ideas is to play "You Don't Know What Love Is" with this kind of feel. Take a listen to the song. Take a listen to the Curtis Mayfield song. Let it in your head. Take little bits and pieces from what you would want to play from it, and then we're gonna start playing it in the set. And I think we rehearsed it over. I think we put it together over a sound check. And, pretty much. I think we played it that night, and then pretty much kept playing it. We pretty much kept playing it, and then it finally started sounding really, really good. And it's okay, time to record. So.
Do you do a lot of road testing on your songs before you go into record?
For us, that's the best way. Very rarely have we ever brought a brand new song into the studio to record. And no shade or disrespect to people, and certainly a lot of those great old Blue Note jazz recordings were what they call blowing sessions, where they would either bring simple blues heads or simple or well-worn standards or whatever. We're going to do it like this, and we're going to talk down a quick arrangement or whatever, and then just first play and record. Yeah. And those were always the greatest sessions ever. With us, it's a little bit, the stakes are a little bit different, because there's so much of what we do as a band is our chemistry and our collective feel. It's going to sound better for us to play these songs, get them really, so we really know how they feel, and then that just makes the session go a lot quicker, because then we can knock out one or two takes, because everybody knows the song. We're not worried about getting this ending or this outro or this intro. It's everybody knows the song. Let's just set up the microphones, make sure everything sounds good.
That makes sense. And one of the cool things about this album is it's the very first jazz release for Pravda. So congratulations on that. That's quite an accomplishment.
About that, it's been wonderful, but I'm so excited to be a part of this group, this institution that's been in Chicago for years. It's been great. I'm really super excited.
That's amazing. So where can people find the album, and how can they follow you? Are you planning on supporting this with a tour, or you say kind of regionally?
Regionally right now, but mainly in the Midwest. But there are plans to hopefully go to both coasts at some point. But that you can get it at the Pravda website, pravdamusic.com. You can get it. It's available on CDs, and there's going to be a vinyl.
Oh, nice.
And you can get it. You can go to their website, Pravda Music, or you can go to my website, chrisgreenejazz.com.
And is there a social media presence that people can follow you to find where you're playing,
Absolutely. Most platforms. So ChrisGreeneJazz, Instagram, Threads, TikTok. I've got a people like TikTok. Let's
I don't get it, but my kids love it.
There you go. We're on there.
Yeah.
and Facebook, of course. So.
Oh, okay. Of course. Yeah, the ever-present Facebook. Man, this has been great. I feel like I've learned a lot, but you've taught me a lot, but not in like a Terrence Fletcher kind of way.
Hope not. I told you I wasn't difficult. Hopefully.
No, I appreciate the non-whiplash version of being taught. So.
No, that's. I will say that's one of the things I'm most excited about as far as this Pravda thing, because without getting too long-winded, the thing that I like to keep in mind is that many of all the people that we love, Thelonious Monks, the Cannonball Adderleys, Coltrane's, all these people, Miles Davis, they all artists, artistic integrity and all that stuff. They had all that stuff and were true to themselves and everything, but they also believed in playing music for regular folks. And it's very, people go these think pieces every year about his dying and whatever. It's like, no, I don't think it's dying. It's just, I think we as musicians, as jazz musicians, spend way too much time trying to play to people that quote unquote get it, and not enough time playing in front of people that might have the capacity to really, really dig it. But, we bluff them off because they don't know the secret handshake. It's like, let's play the music for the people and get them into it. And so that's why I'm really, really excited to be working with Pravda, because they are not a jazz label. Their reach is outside of jazz. What they've built up over these 40 years is a reputation for putting out really, really good music. So the fact that they're even working with us is an incredible honor, but it gives us a chance to just reach regular folks and, regular folks that might dig what we do, and without pretense of, it's a jazz and I don't get it. And, it's old people music or whatever. It's like, give it a shot, and hopefully you'll dig it.
Well, I love the album. I'm getting more into jazz just by listening to it. And I hope you guys get a chance to come to the East Coast in the DC area, because I would love to catch a show and bring my camera, take some shots.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for spending a good chunk of your evening with me. I mean, I really appreciate it. And I'm so enjoying the album. So congratulations on being Pravda's first jazz release.
Thank you very much. Super excited. Again, super excited. And I think it's great to talk to you. Thank you very much.